Hello everyone, and welcome to this video lecture on creating evocative perspectives using the photomontage technique. So today we're going to look at creating a perspective just like this one, and we ask ourselves the question, how do we get from here, a one-point perspective, to an evocative perspective, and the idea of photomontage technique that is not representing things in a photorealistic render, and the difference between why, and we're trying to kind of do the opposite. What we're trying to do here is represent the experience by creating an interpretation of what it might be like in there, rather than creating a photorealistic experience of every single detail of the building, in the structure, and how it goes. Because what it will look like on site is very hard to capture even in a photorealistic render. We're wanting to try and focus on capturing the emotion and atmosphere. It's a very popular technique used across all architecture schools and by graphic designers. And a lot of different people use this and compare between a photorealistic and photomontage render. I personally prefer the photomontage because after all, the photo render is never going to capture, no matter how good it looks, it's never going to capture the reality of the space. And so you're always just going to upset people and clients and yourselves that it doesn't quite look the same as it's built on site. So to me, it seems better to create an essence of the experience that we're trying to move towards. And it becomes more about the architecture, the experience, rather than about specific details. So how do we get from here to here? Well, let's first look at the photomontage technique. Here are some examples in Pinterest. You could say whatever you want about Pinterest, but it is a great resource and it's a great place to find a lot of examples curated by others. So here we look at many different photomontage examples that you can see that some look a little more realistic than others. And we move towards more of the collage art technique, which is what we'll be looking at today. But the principles remain the same. The technique remains the same in Photoshop. It just depends on how you tweak the final product to look a certain way. So my preferred styles are ones that are here and here and this one here, but it really is dependent on the experience and atmosphere of the project that you're trying to capture. So think back to your research in case you think back to the house itself and ask yourself, what were the architects trying to achieve in terms of the experience, and then find a style here or your own that could work for you. So that for me is these kind of styles, but I want to talk to you about where they come from, this photomontage technique, that they all have a connection back to art, and the actual collage technique. So examples like this one here of David Hockney, and you'll see lots of this in the image that I've created for this demonstration today. This is a Californian modernist piece, and you can tell with your eyes kind of darting around, it's not real, but at the same time there is this feeling or a sensation about the warmth and the summer, the Saturdays and holidays, and all these kind of things that come rushing into the foreground when you look at these images. Even though it's not real, we can tell that it's not real in our eye. We look at perspectives like this, and we can tell that, again, it's not real, the sky, it's not green like this, but we have an impression of what it looks like to stand there and to witness this space and the experience again. Probably my favorite is Edward Hopper. You all might be familiar with, but my personal favorite is this one, Morning Sun, because while it's not photo real, we have this amazing sense of what it's like. It's so relatable that the experience of sitting there and having the morning's sun come into the bedroom and experience that peace. So that's really what we're trying to capture in the photomontage technique. It's about experience, not about creating photorealistic imagery. So think about that as you're layering in Photoshop. What is the experience that you're trying to create? So let's first go through all of the layers that I've got here now. Normally I would clean up these a little bit. For example, these these plant layers, I would join them into one rather than having them individually because they are proposed as close together and stacked. I just wanted to keep all of the layers open as possible so you can see all of the work that goes into building an image like this. It's not difficult work, and it's the same technique that Anthony talked about last week, but I just wanted to give you more of a demonstration on the selection tools and the brush tool, some shortcuts and a few other things that we might talk about today. But it's also about slowly layering up the space to create the image. So if I turn all these off quickly, you'll see all of these different layers, and together, whether they be material or vegetation or color, texture, light, shadow, you'll also see that we play a little bit less with the soft and ambient light and the shadow to these kind of drawings, because it's more about the essence of the experience than creating a photorealistic image. So continuing to take off, and you see more and more all of these textures coming away. From the original perspective, all of these are just cut out using the selection tool, using the magnetic selection tool or the lasso, and they all come together. We've got our sky in there, and that's going to go back to our original perspective, that one there. Okay, so this is the base model that I started off with. I usually start with a very simple CAD model that gives us a little bit of a context, and trying to save it with like a very light line weight is important to get a really crisp finish. Unfortunately, I got this from a project that was done a few years ago and hadn't really learnt that, so you'll be able to see in my demonstration today how important line weight is, and just making sure that you don't get these white gaps everywhere. So before I get started in the Photoshop, I'll have a look at the different textures and PNG elements that are needed for this image. This is a great website. It's SketchUp Texture. It's got a huge library. You just need to log in and you have so many downloads for free. Also, PNG is there's so many different websites out there. You just got to be careful because some can be a little bit funny with downloading. So I really like PNG Wing. It has a huge collection of plants, and also use Pinterest models. I think they look a bit more modern, and you know, that vibe that we like in 2024. So you just type in models white background and you should be able to get a whole heap. And with the AI tool in Photoshop now, you just import the image and you can cut out the background. Really simple if it's this basic white background in the back. Also, kids is a really good collection of children that you can grab from Pinterest. So once you feel like you've got a good collection, just save it into a folder so it's easy just to drag and drop into your Photoshop file. So here we're just going to create a new project, and we're going to save it at the same size as the perspective that we've saved. So here I'm using 4020 by 297, it's the A3 size. We're going 300 pixels per inch. We want to change this to millimeters though, make it 8-bit. Yep, using an RGB. My background is white. And yep. So now I'm going to grab my PDF and just drag it and drop it into place. One crucial step when you're using a PDF is that you want to select Media Box. This tells Photoshop that it is an A3 size, and you can see that my lines go all the way to the edges and it looks good. like I've said before, try and get the lightest or thinnest line weight as possible. We're going to be adding textures all the way to these lines and around and this perspective now. If we have thick lines like this, it does make it much harder for you to, so when you're turning the drawing off later, it won't end up with lots of heavy white gaps between all of the textures. And then you'll have to go and edit all of the textures all over again. So you really want from the start to make sure that you're doing it correctly and make sure that you're adding your perspectives in with the thinnest line weights as possible. You'll see in my demonstration that this does get a little bit messy, so yeah, just nice clean line weights are really good if you can use a CAD software to draft up your perspective. Alright, from the very first step, I'm going to start adding some stone walls to this wall at the bottom. I'm going to grab my texture that I saved off earlier, and we're going to just drag and drop it in here. Now I want to show you a few techniques on how to achieve the right scale, and you'll see just when you select this by Control T, we hold Shift key down and we can scale it down to match the perspective that we're working on. We can right click and then go to Distort. We drag it over into place, and then once we feel like that's in a pretty good space, then we will just pull it over. So you can see that this is really warping the texture and it doesn't look quite right. So it looks really distorted and thin, and these ones down this end are way too big. So we just want to tile the texture. By pressing Control T, Control C and Control V, you'll be able to copy and paste another layer and just line them up, and then you hold Shift down, select all the layers, merge layers by right clicking, Control T again to select, and then we just jiggy it into the right place. So we want it to be running along the whole perimeter of this stone wall. Right click, distort, we just pull it into these lines to make sure that it looks at the right scale. But here you can see how tripling the texture has allowed us to make this far less warped. Then we're going to copy this layer again. I've kept it off the sides of the wall because these are going to be curved, so we can just cheat and reuse this image. Just pull it down into place with this distort tool. We click off, then we can use the lasso tool and we just cut off the parts that we don't need, just pressing delete. And then we're going to use the opacity tool to bring it down so we can see. We're going to zoom in here, just see where the lines are. This is actually a bit big because we just want to be able to corner the very corner and curve it with more of the warp tool. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to duplicate it so we've got another extra portion of this wall to use later. I'm going to go press L for lasso and then cut off the extra part that I don't need. Use right click, warp, and then just kind of drag it in to give it a bit more of this curve. So we just keep adjusting it and playing around with the nodes on the corners and sides until we feel like it looks just right. Okay, great. I think this is pretty much there. Now I've zoomed in, I can see that this texture on the right needs to be modified a little bit, so I've just used the distort tool, pulled it out so it butts the edges, and then just zoom back out to have a look to see if it looks okay. So now I select the layer I want to use on the right bar. We Control T to select, right click to distort, and just move it up into place. So make sure that we select our layer, then we just pull down the opacity to check it that it looks okay. Then we can press L for the lasso tool again and just cut off the parts that we don't want. And just press delete. And then pull up the opacity, and yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to cheat here and I'm going to find that layer that I used on the curve and just duplicate it. Control V, Control C, Control V, and then pull it over into place. So just kind of using the transform tool and the nodes to just connect that curve. Zoom in a little bit and we can see like just that bottom corner needs a little bit of, and yeah, okay. The saturation, you press Control U and this little panel will pop up, and it's a great way to control the different colors that you're after. Quite commonly all the textures that you'll bring in will be at the wrong tone or color, so just find your you can use the Control U to get the saturation, or you can select your layer, right click, and yeah, right click, select pixels. That'll select everything in that layer. Then you go to the new layer that you create above it and you press G for color drop or bucket. You get the tone that you're after, which I want to introduce a bit more of a warmer tone, and then you just drop the color into place, and you can use the opacity tool to just play around with it, or the color and saturation tool. So with your layer selected, you'll press Control U. This little panel will come up, and then you can adjust the tones and colors with this hue panel here. It's a very handy tool to have. So I'm going to bring up some of the saturation and just play around with the different options. So here we can make the orange a bit more intense, or we can give it a bit more of different hues. We can experiment using the photomontage technique of what these hues and colors can do to this image, and see very, very quickly the different types of options of colors. So for example, if you wanted to change the color of the sky from a blue, then you want it to be more aqua, you can quickly adjust it with this tool. Don't be afraid to experiment. If you feel like you've gone too far, just use the Control Z and you'll be able to undo the previous changes that you've done. To deselect, you press Control D to let go. So now I'm going to do the glazing, which is predominantly the whole facade in this building, and it's overlooking a lake. I found this nice image and I'm just, okay, so yeah, I didn't hold the shift key, and see how it just kind of sits. So make sure to hold the shift key if you're trying to scale an image down. Then I'm going to just drag it on top of the saturation layer. I'm going to bring down the opacity quite low so I can see my lines behind the image. Try and get it into the right space. I'm going to press Control L for the lasso tool. I'm going to zoom right in and make sure that I'm clicking the right lines. Selecting all of this around. So just trying to show you very quickly on these kind of techniques on what you can do. We just want to get the glazing, so that's it. Then we press the mask button and it just crops out all of it. That is our glazing. Going to bring the opacity right back up and just start to play around with the tone. Because it is glazing, it always looks darker in reality. So I'm just going around and tidying up some of these edges to clean up the lines, because I do have thicker line weights, but if you did have your finer lines, it'd be a lot easier to crop and lock into place. I'm going to bring down the saturation a bit and then just play around with the lightness and darkness until I feel like it's just right. So I'm going to add in a concrete material by dragging and dropping and just changing the scale selecting, holding in the shift key, pulling it down a little bit. Now this is going to be going on a few different planes of my perspective. This one here facing the building is going to be a little bit darker than the facades that are facing the front. We want it to be a bit brighter. I've just realized that some of this wall isn't actually concrete. Parts of it's going to be glazing. So I'll go around and just select the other glazed walls that are facing the building next door and not the lake. We don't really want to show a reflection of the lake because they're not facing it, but we're going to use the eyedropper tool. Control E, pick up a tone, and then we're just going to shade it in. I do have this opacity, this brush, so you can see it can overlap. Just be mindful of that. If I just want to have it a bit darker though, I just keep my finger down and keep the brush down, and it will just keep the right tone. I think I'm just going to go to the lasso and just select this wall that's not facing the lake and the other wall below, because we want them to be a little bit darker, just to show a difference. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go to my concrete and start to play around with the different planes and angles with the distort tool again, just scaling it up. It's okay, then I'm going to duplicate that layer to use for the other kinds of planes that I'm working with, and then I'm going to go back and select the first layer, Control T, distort, just pull it down into meet some of these lines with the CAD model that I've had. This kind of gets the right angles because we want it to meet the vanishing point of our perspective. Perspective is coming from a certain angle, and we can use our original lines as guides to get the right proportion. Now I'm going to pull down the opacity so I can see my building, and then press L and hold the shift key in so you can add your selections as you work around. So make sure to zoom right in, and then you'll just hold the shift in, select all of the lines that you want to fill with this texture. So I'm going to try and have this plane that's facing towards this building as one layer, and carefully just selecting around as neatly as we can to be as precise as we can so we don't get all those white gaps as we're layering up our Photoshop. And like I said, make sure to hold the shift key in. If you do a mistake, you just press delete and that will take you back a step. So holding the shift key in again, I'm going to add this subfloor in. We want that to be concrete as well. Double click. Yep, so delete, go back. Okay, double click and we've got our selection. Any parts that we want to add or delete or clean up, we just press the rectangle with the circle in it, and that masks our image. Now we turn on the other layer, we press Control T to select, we drag it into place. So this is going to be on the front horizontal planes. And we just bring down the opacity, do the same thing. We press Control L with the lasso tool, select all of the components that we want to use this texture on. It's taking my time, but I am going to make this go a little bit faster because I know that the demonstration is going to drag on very quickly, so I'm going to speed this part up. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the original image now and just talk about some of the other elements that we've got. So I'll just get rid of that one and open it back up again. So for this demonstration, I want to show you how I like the Edward Hopper technique, and that it's not about the shadows but rather about texturizing these different colors together so that we make these different colors that can really stand out and create a mood for this image. We could play around with the lightness and create the more of a pinky tone. We can bring it right up, make it stand out. That's a little bit too pinky. Just for the sake of this demonstration, I want to show you the power of this tool. So say I wanted to make my sky a lot more darker, then it creates more of this nighttime, like very like darkness. It just really kind of creates a completely different environment. So have a play around with it. The effects that we're playing with here can really turn some realistic things like these PNG plants that we brought in, and we can turn it into more of an artist's abstraction of that. And it's the abstraction that gives us the essence of the emotive quality that we're after for this kind of image. So to summarize the techniques that we've used today, we've used the selection tool quite a bit and the paintbrush. A really good option to play around with the size of the paintbrush as well is holding in Control Option with your mouse button down, and that adjusts the size of the paintbrush. We've used the bucket tool and how to press G and drop in different colors, bring in textures, and how we right click, distort, warp, and use that tool. How we can use Command T, and that we've looked at the different hue tools as well, and that really is where it's like creating those layering in colors and layering in textures. But after we slowly add all of these things in together, we come with an image that is quite evocative and quite beautiful. That's how changing the sky can really change the whole image and be interpreted as more of a nighttime. We can put a moon in there and showcase like a beautiful full moon that's overlooking. It really does make it feel like a very different light conditions when you play around with those hues and saturation tools. But I know it's just a trick of the eye, but we can really very much see how using the hue tool can manipulate the overall image. And I really wanted to show today how using an artist's interpretation can make your graphic photo montage renders really stand out. And it's about having fun and enjoying experimenting with lots of different layers, and remembering never to leave one textural layer by itself, always having doubles which help you mute the colors and play with the colors, but also to have fun and enjoy this experience and create a wonderful atmosphere. Okay, bye for now.